What the tide carries? One the obvious way. The first time the world ends, Katara thinks it's an earthquake. The ground doesn't shake so much as exhale, a slow groan from somewhere beneath the northern air temple that she feels in her teeth before she hears it. Aang is laughing at something Sokka said. Toph has her feet planted, frowning at the stone. And then the temple's western spire, the one the refugees have been using as a granary, comes apart like wet paper, and the screaming starts, and Katara is running before she's finished understanding why. She doesn't make it in time. Nobody does. The fire that follows the collapse isn't ordinary fire. It moves wrong, hungry, and patient at once, and by the time she's pulled 6 children out of the rubble, her arms are shaking too hard to bend water from the cisterns, and Aang is shouting her name from somewhere she can't see, and the world is very bright, and then it isn't anything at all. She wakes up in her bedroll. It is dawn. Aang is laughing at something Sokka said. That's not funny, she says, too sharply, and Sokka blinks at her, hurt, and she has no idea what he'd been about to say because she's never heard it before, except she heard it an hour ago, a day ago, whichever this is, and across the courtyard, scrubbing soot that isn't there off his hands. Zuko goes very still. He looks up, he looks at her the way you look at someone you've just watched die. You felt that too, he says. It isn't a question. They don't tell the others. Not at first, because what would they say? We have lived this day before. Only you didn't. You're all going to say the exact things you said the last time, and I am going to know it's coming and not be able to stop it. And because some animal part of both of them assumes this is a fluke, a fever dream, a spirit's trick, that will not survive a second pass. It survives 9. By the 3rd loop, Katara has a plan. Get everyone off the western spire before dawn breaks fully, before the foundation gives. She drags Sokka by the wrist through the corridors, evacuates the granary herself, screams at refugees who look at her like she's lost her mind. Because as far as they know, nothing is wrong yet. The spire falls anyway. Not from the west this time, from underneath. Some fault line in the mountain's old bones that has nothing to do with where the grain is stored. 40 people die instead of 60. She counts this as almost worse, somehow, because it means the mountain itself wants this, and you cannot reason with a mountain. By the 5th loop, Zuko has a different plan. He finds her before sunrise, soot already under his nails from a fire that hasn't happened yet, and says, low and urgent, "It's not the building. I think it's me."
What?
My uncle will say, that there are old fire temples sealed beneath these ice temples, from before the air nomads built here. I think something under the mountain reacts to firebending. I haven't been anything near the spire in any loop. What if I just don't? At all. Today, it is, annoyingly, a good theory. She hates that it's his. She hates more that she agrees to it. That for one loop they orchestrate an elaborate dance to keep Zuko's hands cold and useless while the sun comes up, Katara hovering at his shoulder like a jailer. Both of them rigid with the hell breath of people who think they've finally solved something. The mountain doesn't care. The spire falls at the same minute it always falls. Zuko, who has not so much as lit a candle, watches it happen with his fists still clenched at his sides, and when Katara finds him afterward in the wreckage of a morning that's about to unmake itself, he says, "I didn't even get to try," in a voice she's never heard him use, small and disbelieving, and she realizes with an unwelcome lurch that some childish part of him had wanted it to be his fault, because his fault would mean his fix. By the 9th loop they have run out of obvious things. They have evacuated early, evacuated late, evacuated nobody, and let it happen to see if maybe fewer people would die if no one panicked. More people died. They have searched for what Sokka, 3 loops running, calls a magic rock, some artifact, some seal, some spirit-touched flaw they could simply remove. They have asked Aang gently and then less gently to airbend the spire's foundation stable, and watched it fall anyway, a half-second slower, which they agreed afterward was the single most awful version yet. Because for half a second it had looked like it might work. There's nothing under the mountain, Zuko says. They are sitting on a ledge above the courtyard, the loop may be 4 hours from resetting, both of them too tired to perform composure for an audience that won't remember it anyway. Or there's everything under the mountain. I can't tell which is worse. We're missing something, Katara says, because she has to believe that. The alternative is that the thing breaks for no reason at all, and she cannot build a single useful thought on top of that idea, so she sets it down and doesn't pick it back up. Not yet. 2. Just surviving each other. She stops counting around loop 40. Not because she loses track, she could never lose track, The number sits behind her eyes like a held coin. But because counting starts to feel like it's doing something like progress, and progress is the one thing this day refuses to contain. By loop 60, the rhythm of survival has calcified into something almost domestic, which is its own kind of horror. She knows exactly when Sokka will make the joke about Aang's ears. She knows the precise tilt of light when the temple bell rings for the noon meal that no one will ever finish eating. She has memorized, against her will, the sound Zuko's mother, no, not his mother, an old woman in the refugee camp who reminds him of his mother. She's seen the look on his face enough times now to know the difference. Makes when she laughs at her grandson's terrible knock-knock joke. The same joke, the same laugh, every single loop. A loop inside the loop, a tiny eternity she has come to resent with her whole heart because it never changes and the spire still falls. She and Zuko stop pretending, around loop 70, that they like each other. This feels, perversely, like relief. You're insufferable, she tells him, on a morning they've spent failing to dig a fire break around the granary's foundation by hand, fingernails split. Both of them streaked black with dirt that the loop will erase in a few hours along with everything else they did with it. You've always been insufferable. Even when you were trying to be one of us, you were insufferable about that. At least I don't lecture, Zuko snaps back. You correct me like I'm one of Aang's homework assignments. I get it, I betrayed you, I'm the villain. You don't have to remind me every loop. I'm not reminding you, I'm reacting. There's a difference, you absolute. She stops, breathes. They are both shaking, and it isn't from the digging. I don't even know what loop this is anymore. 81, he says, immediately, flatly, and something about the certainty in his voice, that he, too, is keeping the coin behind his eyes, makes the fight go out of her all at once, replaced by something heavier and far less satisfying to feel. They develop habits, in the long unspooling middle of it, that neither of them would call kindness, exactly. He starts handing her tea before she asks for it, because he's learned which loops leave her hands cold by mid-morning. She starts positioning herself, without being asked, between him and Sokka's questions about the scar, not to protect him. She tells herself, just because she's tired of watching the same 5-minute scene of Sokka's clumsy curiosity and Zuko's flinch. Tired in the specific way that makes you want to skip ahead in a book you've read 40 times. It isn't tenderness. She is careful in her own head to never once call it that. They fight more than they don't. About strategy, about whose fault it might secretly be, about old things bossing say, the cave, the lightning he didn't throw fast enough, the choice he made and unmade in front of her like it cost him nothing. Like she hadn't spent a night afterward unable to stop shaking. Some loops the fight is the only thing either of them does before the spire falls. They spend whole days screaming at each other in the snow instead of trying to save anyone, and the terrible thing, the thing Katara doesn't say out loud until much, much later, is that those loops feel, in some twisted way, like the most honest ones? By loop 100 and something, she has, despite herself, lost the exact count, and the loss frightens her more than she lets on. She stops trying new evacuation routes. She still goes through the motions, still hauls children from the granary, still burns her palms raw bending water from cisterns that refill themselves come morning like nothing happened, because stopping that pert feels like a line she cannot cross. But the hope has gone out of it. She does it now the way you breathe. Not because you expect it to fix anything, just because the alternative is unthinkable. Do you ever think, Zuko says, they're on the ledge again? It's almost always the ledge now. Their bodies have worn a kind of groove into this one habit even as everything else fractures, that we're being punished. For what? I don't know. Something. Everything. He's looking at his hands. I used to think the universe ran on a kind of order. If you did the right thing eventually it balanced out. I don't know what I think anymore. That's very philosophical for someone who set my brother on fire twice this week. That was an accident. Both times. A beat. Once. She almost laughs. It startles her, the almost. She can't remember the last time anything in this loop nearly made her laugh, and the rarity of it lands like grief. I think, she says slowly, because she's never said this part out loud, not even to herself in so many words, that we keep trying to solve this like it's a puzzle. Move the right piece, find the seal, stop the right person from bending the wrong thing. And maybe it's not that kind of problem, then what kind is it? She doesn't answer. She doesn't have an answer. Not yet, but something in her has started, very quietly, to suspect. It is somewhere past loop 200, neither of them will ever agree on the precise number, and they will, After, joke bitterly about commissioning a historian, that the breaking finally happens. Not the loop, them. It starts small. Zuko snaps at a refugee child for asking, in the bright, unknowing way only a child stuck at the start of an endless morning could ask, why he looks so sad all the time. He doesn't shout. He just turns away too fast, jaw tight, and walks off toward the spire alone, 3 hours before it's due to fall, and doesn't come back until it's already happening. Katara finds him in the rubble afterward, the loop's final, hollow hour, the part she has come to think of as the grace period, when there's nothing left to save and they simply wait for the world to reset around them like a held breath finally released. He's sitting with his back against a slab of broken stone, not moving, not even watching the fires he usually at least pretends to fight. You didn't even try, she says. It isn't an accusation, not really. It comes out hollow. What's the point? His voice is wrecked in a way she hasn't heard before, not angry, not performing anything, just emptied out. Tell me the point, Katara. We've done everything. We've done it backward and sideways and apart and together, and it falls. It always falls. I am so tired of watching children die in the same 6 minutes for the rest of, for however long this is. I don't even know what forever means anymore. It used to mean something, and now it just means Tuesday. So we stop trying. That's your answer. I don't have an answer. That's the whole. He stops himself, presses the heel of his hand against his good eye. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, wanted it badly enough, I could earn my way out of anything. My father, my honor, the war? You? I thought if I did enough right things they'd add up to something. They don't add up to anything. The spire falls whether I'm a hero or a coward today. It doesn't care which one I pick. Katara sits down across from him, slow, careful, because something in the air between them has shifted into a register she doesn't recognize and isn't sure how to hold. I used to think that too, she admits. About you, actually. I kept waiting for you to add up to something. Villain or not villain. I wanted the math to work out so I'd know how much to hate you. And it never adds up. You're not a sum, Zuko. None of us are. She picks at a loose thread on her sleeve, an old nervous habit the loop keeps giving her back to fidget with. Maybe that's the part we keep getting wrong. We keep trying to fix this like it's an equation with a missing variable. Find the right bending, the right evacuation, the right sacrifice. But what if the thing that's actually broken isn't out there in the mountain at all? He looks at her properly, for the first time in what might be weeks or might be 190 mornings. Then what is it? She doesn't know yet, but for the first time since the spire first fell, she feels something other than exhaustion stirring under the words. Something almost like the shape of a question worth asking. 3. Reckoning. The loop that finally breaks doesn't start any differently. Ong laughs at something Sokka said. The old woman tells her grandson the same joke. Katara wakes with the coin count behind her eyes. By now she's stopped trying to keep it precise. It's somewhere past 250, near enough, and finds Zuko already awake, sitting outside her tent in the gray pre-dawn like he's been waiting. I don't want to evacuate anyone today, he says, before she can speak. Excuse me? I don't want to fight the fire. I don't want to dig a fire break. I don't want to do the thing where we run around frantically pretending we're going to win, when we both know exactly how this ends, down to the minute. He looks wrung out in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. I want to talk to you instead. Actually talk, before it happens. Just once. Her first instinct is refusal. Children will die, are going to die regardless of what she does today. But the idea of choosing not to try feels like a betrayal of every loop that came before. But she thinks of the math that doesn't add up, the sum that never balances, and something in her, exhausted past the point of performing hope, says, what is one more loop against 250? Okay, she says. Talk. They walk away from the temple entirely, up the goat path toward the old shrine ruins where no one ever goes, and the sun comes up around them slow and indifferent. And somewhere behind them the spire is already creaking with whatever flaw lives in its bones, and for once neither of them runs toward it. I lied to you, Zuko says, when they've stopped, when the temple is small and far below them, in the crystal catacombs, when I said I knew what it was like to lose your mother that way. I didn't. Not really. I made it about me, the way I always do, because making it about me was easier than actually sitting with how much it cost you to trust me with that. I've had 200 and however many mornings to think about it, and I still don't think I've ever actually apologized. Not the real way. You don't have to do this because we're stuck in a loop, she says, though something in her chest has gone tight and strange. I know, that's not why. He's not looking at her. He's looking at the horizon, hands loose at his sides instead of clenched, which she realizes she has never once seen in 250 mornings. I think I've been so afraid, this whole time, of being the villain in this story, that I never let myself actually be sorry. Sorry takes up room? It means sitting in what I did instead of explaining it away. I'm sorry, Katara. For the cave. For choosing wrong when it counted the most. I don't expect it to fix anything. I wanted to say it once, outside the loop, where it might actually mean something, instead of just being something we survived together like weather. She's quiet for a long moment. Below them, faint, she hears the first crack of stone, the spire beginning its same collapse, right on schedule, indifferent to whatever is happening up here. She doesn't run toward it. The choice costs her something physical, a wrongness in her chest like swallowed water. But she stays. I've hated you for being two things at once, she says finally. The boy who hunted us across the world, and the boy who helped me find peace with what happened to my mother. I never let those be the same person, because it was easier to keep you as a villain I understood than as a person I didn't. That's not fair to you. I don't think I've ever told you that either. You don't have to forgive me, because we're stuck in a loop, he says, echoing her, a small broken smile in it. I know, that's not why. She looks at him, really looks, the way you look at someone after deciding to stop flinching from them. I think I forgave you somewhere around loop 60, honestly. I just never said it out loud. It felt like admitting I'd lost an argument I'd been having with myself for a year. Below them, the spire finishes falling. The sound reaches them late and muffled, an old grief instead of a fresh one. Neither of them moves toward it. This too costs something. Katara feels the cost in her teeth, in the place behind her sternum where the urge to fix always lives, but she sits with the wrongness instead of running from it, for the first time in 250 some mornings, and finds, unexpectedly, that she survives the sitting. I don't think this is going to fix anything, Zuko says quietly, after a while. I don't think two people apologizing to each other on a hillside is going to stop a building from falling down. No, Katara agrees. Probably not. But she doesn't get up, and neither does he. And the strange thing, the thing she'll turn over for years afterward, long after the details of this conversation have softened at the edges, is that for the first time since the spire first cracked, the not fixing doesn't feel like failure. It feels like something closer to rest. They talk until the sun is properly up, about smaller things now, his uncle's tea, her father, the ridiculous knock-knock joke neither of them can escape. And somewhere in the middle of an exchange about whether Sokka's jokes have gotten worse, or whether they've just heard them too many times to laugh, Katara realizes the light hasn't changed in the way it always changes near the loop's end. The bell that rings for the noon meal doesn't ring. The gray hour that marks the grace period, the held breath before the reset, doesn't arrive on schedule. Zuko? I know, he says. He's gone very still beside her. I know. They sit there, afraid to move, afraid that breaking the moment will break whatever fragile thing just shifted, and watch the sun crawl past the hour the spire always falls, past the hour the world always ends, into an afternoon that neither of them has ever seen before in their lives. It does not fix anything in the way a fix usually looks. The spire is still gone, the mountain's flaw still presumably sleeping somewhere in its old bones, ready to be triggered by some other cause on some other day they will never see. They never learn exactly why the loop held them, or why it let them go, or whether it was ever really about the mountain at all. Some part of Katara will wonder for years afterward whether the day had simply been waiting for the two of them to stop trying to outrun each other long enough to actually arrive, whether the loop's only real flaw, the one variable in the impossible equation, had been the gap between them and not the mountain underneath them at all. She will never be sure. She decides, eventually, that she doesn't need to be. 4. After. They tell the others almost nothing. There's no good way to explain 250 mornings to people who lived only one of them. And besides, Katara finds she doesn't especially want to. It feels like something that belongs to the two of them and no one else. Not a secret exactly, just a private weight, carried jointly, that doesn't need an audience to be real. What does change is smaller and harder to name and entirely permanent. Zuko stops flinching quite so hard when Sokka asks about the scar. Katara stops positioning herself between them out of irritated habit and starts doing it occasionally on purpose, with something that might honestly be called care if either of them were willing to call it that out loud, which they aren't. Not yet, maybe not for a long while. They don't become friends overnight. There's no clean montage, no sudden ease. He still infuriates her with his particular brand of brooding, and she still corrects him sharper than she means to when his temper runs ahead of his judgment. But there's a different quality to the friction now, less like grinding stone, more like the resistance of something being worn comfortable. When they argue, it no longer feels like surviving each other. It feels, oddly, like a kind of trust, the trust that the other person will still be there afterward, unflinching. Having already seen the worst version of this argument play out 200 times, and chosen, every time, to stay anyway. Months later, the real kind, the kind that only happens once, Sokka will make the joke about Aang's ears again, the very same one, and Katara will catch Zuko's eye across the fire entirely by accident. And something will pass between them too quiet for anyone else to notice, a private, exhausted, oddly grateful kind of recognition. We know this moment, it says. We have lived in it longer than anyone here will ever understand. We are still here. We are still, somehow, choosing to be. Neither of them will ever say it out loud, not even to each other. They don't have to. Some debts get paid in apology, and some get paid simply in showing up, morning after morning after morning, for as long as it takes, and some things, once witnessed clearly enough, by exactly the right person, never need repeating again.